study session, Shellmound, 6701 Shellmound Street residential development.
Good evening, Chair Cardoza, Planning Commissioners. This is the second study session on the Nady site, or 6701 Shellmound Street. The first study session took place last December. And to kind of get you oriented with the site, this is the triangular shaped site, and this is where that is. So the previous site plan somehow looked like this. I'm not going to go into details. This is simply to trigger your memory. It's a 2.25 acre site. Earlier on, it was a 260 unit proposal with ground floor 3,000 ground floor commercial space. And there were various amenities and open areas. And this was one of the rendering for the Shellmound Street rendering. At the December Planning Commission, some of the key Planning Commission comments were that there was a need for a distinctive design. There was a suggestion made to open up the courtyards, add balconies, create more usable open space, bring the residential space down to the ground level, use more durable materials, and that the building needed to take advantage of potential views and the need to make the building taller and slimmer. The Commission was generally okay with the unit mix and the size of the units. Now, the key project changes that the applicant has made in response to the comments that they heard was that the number of units have declined by almost 50, from 260 to 211. It is now a single residential use instead of a mix of a residential and some commercial use. There's a reduced building footprint to accommodate the 20-foot fire lane around the site. Earlier, it was an 8-story building. It was 6 residential levels over 2.5 levels of garage, and the half was the partial basement garage level. This has been changed to a 7-story with 5 residential levels over 2 levels of garage. So the partial basement garage has been deleted. There are some new unit types, but the unit mix and the average unit size remain similar, and this has been detailed out in the staff report, so I'm not going to go into it too much here. The lobby has been relocated from the northeastern corner to the northwestern corner around Shellmound Street in order to give a better presence on Shellmound. They have broken up the central courtyard to create 3 smaller ones, and they have refined their landscaping and open space plan. So this is their current site plan. Shellmound Street is right here, just to orient you. So what has the main change that has occurred at the ground level is, in terms of use, if you may recall earlier on, the uses, the commercial uses were aligned along Shellmound, with the lobby being around here. This has now changed. The lobby has moved closer to this area where it says lobby, and initially the ground floor commercial space is now going to be used to provide amenities for the tenants itself. So they have a dog spa, a fitness center, a bike spa. In addition to that, they have now created townhouses on the ground level, 2-story townhouses at these 2. And in terms of circulation, the loading has changed. It is now located here, and the entrance sort of remains the same into the garage here. What you see in blue is where is the bike parking and bike storage. In terms of parking level itself, they are now using parking lifts to accommodate more parking spaces while not going underground. And you can see this on the second floor level. So again, this is the second level of the garage. These are the upper levels of the townhouses. And along here, which you have amenities below, are apartment units. This is a third floor plan of the podium plan, and you can sort of clearly see how the 3 courtyards have been created. Then the plans for the 4th, 5th, and the 6th are sort of similar, and this is the illustrative. So these are the sections. As you can see, you have 2 levels only. You have the first level, which is slightly higher in order to accommodate the stacked parking lifts. The total height remains 84 at this level, yeah. I'm not going to go too much in details as far as elevations and the building materials and the design is concerned, because I believe the applicant is going to describe each changes that they have made and why they have made that and what is that in response to. But I've just highlighted some of the introduction of new materials that they're using now. This is directly in response to the Commission's comment that you were tired of plaster. This is the landscape plan. Again, I will let the applicant go into greater details. This is a lot more refined and thought out. You have the 3 courtyards here at the podium level, and they've done more treatment along the ground floor level, especially treatments near in front of the townhouses on both corners. And I'm going to let the applicant go into greater details regarding the different components of this plan. So this is the rendering from Shellmound Street, and this would be the lobby right here. And this is how one of the courtyards would look like. So in terms of conformity to land use policies, this is in the MUR zone. The proposed use, as I mentioned, is a multi-unit residential only, which is allowed by right in MUR. However, the parcel size, when the parcel size is between 1 and 5 acres, which this one is, our regulations require a mix of uses. And if a mix of uses is not possible, a single use is allowed, but it needs a use permit. And the finding that the Commission needs to make for a use permit to allow single use is that the mix of uses is not feasible at this site. So this is the finding that you would be making when this project comes again in front of you for consideration. Attached to the staff report is a letter that was submitted by the applicant from a commercial real estate broker giving some explanation of why the infeasibility of having commercial uses on this site. In terms of FAR and density as well as height, what they're proposing is all allowed by right. So this again has changed. Earlier at the last study session, they needed bonus points for residential density, but they have now reduced the unit count, which brings it down to 211, and that is allowed by right. And the height, of course, is well below what is allowed by right, as well as FAR is well below what is allowed by right. In terms of vehicular parking, this kind of remains the same as the last time. Then some of the numbers have obviously changed because of the reduction in the units. So the total required, excuse me, is 369. They're proposing 264. So the project will require a CUP for providing parking that is less than the required minimum. And for this use permit, the following findings will need to be made. One is that there are TDM measures are put in place to reduce parking demand, and that the reduction of parking spaces will not result in parking impacts on adjacent uses. The applicant has provided a parking survey, and this will be peer-reviewed in our CEQA study that is being conducted as we speak to assess whether what the parking that they are providing would be adequate or not, and the TDM measures that may be necessary. In terms of bike parking, the required is 13 and 13 short-term and 211 long-term, and I think I indicated whether the parking spaces are distributed in the building. And so they are providing 211 spaces within a secure garage and 14 spaces for short-term, which is located just outside their lobby. In terms of the open space, the required private open space is 8,400 square feet without substitution, and the common open space is 4,200 square feet. What they're proposing is the common open space, which is well above what is required, and a portion of this will be substituted to provide private open space. And the private open space calculations cannot be made at this point because I kind of need to know how many units have balconies, because not all of the units have balconies. So those calculations with the substitution should work themselves out, but that is something that when they provide more information, it should be in front of you. But they are very well aware of their private open space requirements, so they've been keeping that in mind as they designed the project. In terms of issues to be considered, again, the mix of uses, this is something that they will be asking a use permit for, and the use permit is to allow single use of multi-unit residential where a mix of uses are required. So we request the Commission give us information regarding whether what information has been submitted so far is adequate, and whether additional information or documentation is necessary, and if so, what type. Unit mix, staff wants to check in again to make sure that the unit mix and the unit size is acceptable. In terms of parking, like I'd mentioned, they are providing less than the required minimum, which is allowed with a use permit, and we are asking you to give us direction whether the proposed parking reduction would be considered and under what circumstances. In terms of open space, we want to check in again whether the proposed common open spaces, in terms of its location and purpose, are to your satisfaction. As I mentioned before, we have hired urban planning partners to conduct the environmental review required under CEQA. We are expecting to do an ISMND, that is mitigated negative declaration. So in terms of the permits that this project will require is a conditional use permit to allow for parking and a single use, not for residential density, that's a typo, only for parking and single use. And the design review permit for a new construction. So that concludes my presentation, and what we are seeking a direction on are these 4 categories: mix of uses, unit mix, parking, open space, and any other issues. So that concludes my presentation. As I mentioned, the applicant does have a fairly extensive presentation as well. If you have any questions from me at this point, I would be happy to answer. Otherwise, we can move on to the applicant's
I understand that the city has a minimum width requirement for courtyards.
Correct.
And that some of these courtyards don't meet that.
Correct. So this will need to be corrected before it comes for your consideration.
Okay.
Please bear in mind, this is a study session. We are not asking you to approve these plans today.
Is that on page 7, the DCC comments, is that at the bottom it says, the building division staff noted that all the courtyards had existing issues that would need to be addressed? Is that?
Exiting issues.
Oh, exiting, okay.
There's no S in there.
There you go.
Yeah,
All right.
so the courtyards have both exiting issues per the
And-
building code and width issues per the planning regulations, so obviously they're going to need to do a little more work on the courtyards.
Okay.
And what kind of width problems are we talking about? I'm just trying to.
It's 50 feet minimum.
Well, the planning code requires that courts be as opposite a required window, that the court has to be at least as wide as the opposite wall is tall. So, in other words, if the opposite wall is 30 feet tall, then the court has to be 30 feet wide. The maximum court width that's required is 50 feet. So if the wall is more than 50 feet tall, the court doesn't have to be any wider than 50 feet. In this case, it appears that the walls are about 55 feet, which would mean the court has to be at least 50 feet.
Okay. Maru, am I correct then that at this point the only as proposed tonight in these drawings, the only thing that a use permit would be required for is the mixture of uses.
Correct. The fact that
and
it
the
is a
parking.
single, that it's a single residential use and not a mix of uses as residential, commercial.
There is one other thing. Any project in the mixed-use zones on a site of more than 1 acre requires a conditional use permit.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just does.
And also the reduced parking, the use permit
Yeah.
for use, and design review for the whole building, yeah.
So regarding the parking, the TDM measures that you said would be required for the reduction in parking, is that something that the applicant, do they pick those from a menu of items and then the commission sort of blesses that when we approve the use permit, or how does that process work?
So what will happen is that, as I mentioned, a traffic report is being, a CEQA review is being done. A part of that, a traffic report will be done on that, including the parking assessment. And they may, out of that report, there may be recommendations regarding TDM. Or we can provide certain TDM measures, the menu of TDM measures, and then they will pick, and whatever they pick and propose, would consult with our traffic engineer to make sure that this is appropriate or not, and that will come to you at the time of consideration. So to answer your question, when you are considering this project for approval, you will know what the TDM measures are either being proposed and or being conditioned.
I don't think TDM includes this, but would that also include pedestrian access to the site? So, for instance, there's going to need to be new crosswalks across Shellmound Street. Is that?
It will be included as part of the traffic study, correct? Okay. Not so much TDM. So they may have mitigation measures if a crosswalk is needed, given this project. So that will become automatically conditions of approval.
I would say, though, that, to the extent that improving the pedestrian environment encourages people to walk as opposed to drive, it could be considered a, contributing thing to a TDM program. Seems reasonable to me.
So if we were to use that as a guideline, could we require that they do something east of the railroad tracks? I'm thinking of the people that live there and being able to walk to Berkeley Bowl. The block east of the railroad tracks has no sidewalks on 66 and 67th Street. So could we, as part of the TDM, say that we would like them to put in some money towards doing some enhancements in the neighborhood in the future?
Industrial area.
Well, I suppose you could. We've discussed that at staff level. There's several issues with that. One is that the railroad tracks themselves do not have ADA accessible crossing. They do at 65th, but not at 66th or 67th. So that would have to be taken care of. Also, that those two blocks, 66th and 67th between Hollis and Shellmound, are kind of our industrial enclave, our heavy industrial enclave. And as you probably know, I think some of those streets may not even have curb and gutter now, and they have 90-degree parking. I have a feeling we might face a minor revolution from the people who have property on those blocks if we propose
The thing I'm getting at, Charlie, is as a person who walks to Berkeley Bowl and who walks a lot, if I live in that building, I am not going to 65th Street, walking up 6 feet and cutting back. I'm going to walk down the street.
Right.
In reality, anyone that lives in that building that wants to walk to Berkeley Bowl is going to walk in the street. That's the reality.
Right.
So I think what we could do is do something to encourage them to put money in for the future. That may stay industrial, but it doesn't mean industrial neighborhoods can't have sidewalks.
Right. We'll have to, and we have a
I'm just looking for the options so that when they come up, if I want to suggest that I know it's a viable option.
I think so. We'd have to struggle to figure out what is the reasonable amount for them to contribute to that.
Okay.
So, I think we would seek any direction that you have in terms of TDM measures, and then we'll then get that checked out in terms of what is fair. Because obviously, they can't build sidewalks.
2 blocks, yeah.
Okay.
So were there any other questions for staff? If not, I'm going to open up.
Applicant, please come forward.
So the flash drive is here. These are your.
So I'm technically challenged. So which one do I want, Vivian? That one? One that says presentation. Oh, okay. That's true. Behind every spokesperson, there's brilliant people. Is that the slideshow? So I'm here tonight, and I saw you all a few months ago, and we've been quite busy. We got a lot of comments that I think shaped and influenced the packet that you now have before you. We're still refining that packet. Pardon me? Thank you. We're still refining that packet. We provided a list of items that were sort of our takeaways from our presentation with you, and one of the most telling comments was, can you do something industrial and take an industrial building and turn it inside out? And as an architect, a comment like that sometimes is a catalyst that launches a project off in a completely new direction that creates a really wonderful opportunity. So you remember we had the rather large donut that was considered rather massive that filled up the site, and that didn't go over too well. And so we took a completely fresh look at this site. We took all the drawings we had done and we set them aside, and my team and I started over. And we looked at the site as the gateway in the beginning of Emeryville as you come from Berkeley, rather than the end of Emeryville as you leave to go into Berkeley. We looked back on the history of Emeryville, and as someone that grew up not far from here, we sought out imagery to inspire us in a more industrial character from the old Sherwood.
I think you can get it to full screen if you hit those little diagonal arrows that are up on the right near the yeah.
You want that?
Maybe. Yeah.
A little small for you guys, sorry. So we pulled the old Emeryville Sherwin-Williams, which is a Chicago frame punched opening building. And the reason we have that there is because if we took that as our inspirational image to launch off it again, we'd end up with a punched frame wall opening building, which is exactly what we showed you last time, which I don't think that's where we wanted to end up again. We pulled images from industrial projects that I've worked on in the Bay Area, from the Remillard brick kiln to projects I visited up in Oregon, the old sweater mills, to contemporary inspiration. And the reason we pulled these images is to re-inspire our design team to launch off in that industrial character. Things like brick, things like signage, things like the little trellises and the metalwork. And then we sat with our client and said, we need to take a fresh look at the architectural imagery, we need to take a fresh look at the materials, and then we took a fresh look at the diagram, and we literally took the project and we turned it inside out. We created a central spine rather than a loop, took all the courtyards and put them out on the edges, and then created a series of wings. And the architectural story we came up with was the original nave of the building, which you saw in your packet has been developed into brick, was constructed originally, and normally in these old mills they have wings that are constructed over time in different materials and start to take on a little bit of their own character. The danger with that story is it can turn into Disneyland if you're not careful. We then had our design team take bits and pieces of that diagram with no floor plans, no architecture, and study ways to do things in a series of materials such as brick, punched openings, corrugated metal, exposing ductwork for shafts like trash rooms. And then you can see there's sort of a finished product of a floor plan that, as Maru mentioned, we shrunk the building. The original structure came all the way out to the property line on this edge. The building footprint has gone down from 76,000 square feet to 63, which obviously opens up a lot of landscape opportunity at grade. And we've developed a linear park concept that doubles as a fire road. It's a comment, and the landscape architect will get into the details of that. There was a comment of, can you bring residential to grade in appropriate locations? And we've developed some townhouses in a couple of neighborhoods. As Maru pointed out, we have some bicycle parking opportunities that spill out into this linear park that create openings and small little entry moments. We've moved the lobby down to the gateway moment of your project. We've taken the sidewalk and brought it into the building so it goes underneath the central brick nave, which basically sits about there. We also took this opportunity to take the trash, or take the loading dock, which was sitting at here, turn it 90 degrees and screen it and put it on the corner and still hang on to that pocket park landscape moment. We took comments from the Bicycle Coalition meeting where we've created a bike spa, the ability to hold classes, the ability to store bikes, the ability to gather and basically have the bike plaza with a separate entrance for the bikers. So the bikes have their entrance and their moment and their sense of entry, and the cars and the loading come this way so they don't collide. We have a fitness center that's tied into the lobby, a dog spa directly off the lobby, trash, and then what AvalonBay does is they have what's called a lobby lounge, which is a space that's a combination of places to meet to rent a place, places to gather. It's a more informal, less structured environment. And then we've created, we've used the paving out here so that the plaza can spill out this direction and this direction towards the main lobby. We stuck with the idea that since there's no parking here currently, that we would do a landscape strip and push the sidewalk back. Obviously the garage still sits in the middle. It's smaller. We don't have a basement. As you go up one floor, flats show up here. We end up with a two-story lobby space on the corner. We end up with the second floor of the townhouses on these locations. You go up one more floor, and you can see the dramatic shift as you have a series of not interior courts, but actually exterior courts. They're U-shaped, they're open. All units view out. They all have the 1,000-yard view, so to speak. Each courtyard has a different character and a feel, and the landscape architect will talk about that. It creates a series of neighborhoods. The corridor system spills out into the courtyards. So you can, from the corridor, from the elevator towers, which is here and here, you have direct access to the courts. You have secondary access to the courts. There was a comment in the staff report that the courtyards don't meet the exiting requirement, and I'm not 100% sure how that comment is accurate, as there's two exits out of both courtyards. And that question was specifically asked, so we will look into that further to find out what's driving that comment. It's possible that as it was being reviewed and as the floor plan was being refined, a stair or corridor got dropped off, and it may be a simple mistake such as that. In order to break down the long distance of the corridors, we've created sort of a central gathering spaces, and then the moments where it spills out into the courtyard, where we can have the corridors exposed themselves for daylight. We do that here and here. As you go up, the building stacks for a few floors. There was a comment about wind and views and appropriateness of the community space on the top floor with an outdoor space. We've chosen to keep one here, and we've created a less formal one. We've enlarged the lobby and created an overlook so that there's the ability to develop an informal one and a more formal one at this end. So the elevators on the top floor actually have little moments to view out and have plazas and gathering spaces. The architecture itself, you can see that we have the central brick nave. We've created the lobby on the corner. We've utilized decks and metalwork to create a little bit of that industrial folly to the building. We've tried to pay close attention to this corner because that's the gateway entrance corner moment to create the focal point so your eye draws up. We're using rain screen material. We're using veneer brick. We're using horizontal metal siding. We do have some cement plaster moments because we think it's an appropriate material, where we have a rounded sort of bay window moment here within the metal. We have, as you go around the building, so this is the view that you get as you come off the freeway, you can see that we have the board form concrete garage. You can see that in moments where there's townhouses, it's glass. You can see that where the little bike parking spills out, it's little storefront. And then of course we have some ventilation moments. As you get down to the end where there's the community garden in the foreground and the townhouses, and again, the decks stack up, the rain screen material, the metal siding, large windows. And then as you come back around the corner, you're coming down Shellmound, headed towards Berkeley. We've done translucent glass garage doors. You can see that the corner units, that the courtyard goes back in there and it goes back in there. You end up with a lot more corner units, and then now we're overscaled. And this is the landscape plan, and if you'd like, I can let them begin their presentation, or I can do architectural questions. What would you prefer? Let them carry on? Okay.
We probably want to ask you questions after.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to run off. You can figure out how to make it smaller.
Yeah, how do I get it smaller? What do I do?
This is above my pay grade.
75%?
Down at the bottom, it's got a fit to,
Fit to.
on that drop-down menu. Yeah,
Oh,
fit
yeah.
width,
Fit. All right.
fit, or that.
Try that one.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Hi there, I'm Jeff Miller, Miller Company, Landscape Architects. So we are back, and we have a much smaller building that we're looking at than we did the last time we were here. Part of it was generated really out of a fire lane access that was required around the building. So you can see the project consists of, let's see now, how am I going to go forward here? Forward and down, okay. As Meru described and Clay described, we've got third floor podium courtyards. We have landscaping along Shellmound, around the property, and in the fire lane. I'm going to get into some of the details of that. So let's down arrow. There we go. Along Shellmound Street, this is the ground floor we're talking about. We've got a series of plazas at the entry points. At the one on the lower right of your screen, that's the entry to the bike room. There's bike parking. There are a series of street trees, different varieties of street trees along Shellmound. There would be a low planter separating the curb from the sidewalk. There's a lot of busy traffic along there. As well, we want to provide a low seat wall along there to create a sense of place in these plazas. Let's see. So this is the, oops. Oh, geez. This is going fast here. There we go. So this is that point of entry, showing the garage entry, the entry plaza there, different kinds of paving, permeable paving in the entry drive. And we'd like to kind of color the sidewalks continuously around so that the pedestrian experience is a continuous feel. Did I do something wrong there? Now what did I do? Why? How about if I scroll like that? All right, I'll click and drag.
But I don't know what the pictures are so small.
I'm not sure why they're so small either. Anyway, so this is a view into the plaza showing the separation of the sidewalk and the street. This would be the raised planter along the sidewalk. Let's see if we can make this a little bigger.
I don't know why it's so small.
Okay. The picture you're seeing is a project up in Portland that we've kind of patterned this after a landscape treatment along the sidewalk, granite slabs for seating, and here is kind of the sense of the shell mound as we see it. There would be no parked cars along the street though. Further up Shellmound, we're getting into the first residential community. There'd be a gateway here, pedestrian gate, and gateway for fire access. There are moments of live landscaping adjacent to the residential units here, and we've wanted to break up the kind of long linear nature of the fire road by creating a meandering path for dog walking and exercise around the property. And we're proposing 2 different materials that would be placed on to the fire lane. An artificial turf that would be supported underneath, and a decomposed granite. Along the fence line, the new fence line, which would be a 6-foot fence, we'd have flowering vines along the edge. So this is a view into the first residential townhouse area there. Boy, this really got small. So these are folks using artificial turf in areas adjacent to there. We think, we don't think there's going to be a fire very often in the place, so we wanted to make it useful. Everything would be underlaid by structural support. So here's kind of the system that we would use, both for the decomposed granite and the artificial turf. Further on, all the residential communities would, or the townhouse communities here would have special planting. This is outside of the fire lane to scale the individual units that all have little patio spaces. Let's see, how do I get rid of that now? There we go. And in the corner of the site, we've developed a small community garden. The adjacent building does step down here, as you can see in the rendering. So we think this is actually a good place for western and south light coming in as another amenity for people on the site, residents. So these are community gardens. We hope it feels something like this, happy people growing good things to eat. On the podium levels, we have 3 distinct courtyards. This is the largest of the courtyards. They'll all be equipped with social space. They will all have private patios adjacent to the units. There is access in and out, as Clay described, to the building. There's a lot more light coming into these courtyards than what was previously shown in the kind of donut scheme. On both the north and the south sides of the project. And again, here is a view into one of the courtyards. This is the larger courtyard. The courtyards would be screened for wind protection on all of the open ends, and we're seeing kind of transparent colored screens as a possibility. They would be equipped with outdoor barbecues and places for people to gather, as well as private terraces. Here's a picture of the kind of screening that we see at the end of the courtyards that we think would be kind of a nice light feature at night as well, that it could be multicolored. And then up on the upper part of the project, there is a community room with an outdoor space that would again have a windscreen. Here we understand it and clearly that it's a windy space, but we want to take advantage of the views to the Golden Gate, and it will have outdoor barbecues and an indoor-outdoor fireplace that would be both inside and outside the building. We will be following bay-friendly strategies for landscaping. This is a preliminary landscape plant list showing different varieties of trees and infiltration plants and shrubs. We will be taking water from the roof to the third floor podium into infiltration planters, and then from the third floor down to infiltration systems along the ground floor. And with the fire lane, we're hoping to have that to be pretty permeable surface. So that's kind of the character of the landscape as we've developed it, and we think it's greatly improved from what you saw the last time. So we're ready for questions, I think.
Start down at Brad.
Want to join me, Clay?
Yep. Landscape-wise, well, there's a mention of a 6-foot fence, and it seemed, at least one image I saw, seemed to show the shadow of an ornamental metal fence at the front. Figure out, is it ornamental metal at the front, and what's going on the side?
Yeah, the 6-foot fence was the fence along the Caltrans property here. So this one, we basically are going to cover with vines. So it's going to be kind of a green wall. The other one needs to open. So we were thinking ornamental ironwork would maybe be more appropriate and match more of the ironwork that's going to go along the building.
What are you envisioning as the one that you're covering with vines?
I'm not really sure yet. As long as it gets covered up with vines, you know, it is a freeway off ramp. It could be a chain link fence. Or
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it's really going to be yet. If you had some suggestions for it, I'm sure we'd entertain that. What I find with fences like this is if you get the right vine, the fence disappears. You've spent a lot of money on a fence that's no longer there. So I've done that too many times.
And then in the courtyards, on the floor plans, the architectural floor plans, it shows the courtyard level units with patios that follow the same profile as the balconies above, more rectilinear. Whereas the landscape plan and renderings show those patios as more organic and actually delineated by the landscaping as opposed to the rails. And I'm just I'm guessing that the landscape plans are correct and the architectural plans just had the, you were just
They have
dropping.
the extra line there. Yeah. You interpreted that correctly.
Okay. And then while you're up here, in the architectural plans where the rounded features are, there's a couple locations.
Yes, here?
Yeah, on the architectural plans, it shows it as if it's just an interstitial space between two walls. But
There's, like in individual unit plans, it's clear.
what's that? Oh, in the
Individual unit
is it?
plans?
Okay.
Is that individual unit plan in the packet or not? The
Okay.
rounded
Do you know what
window?
page that's on?
A
823, 8.2.3.
We can add that to the packet. That individual one isn't in there,
Oh, okay.
but it's
Is that a,
dining area.
okay.
It's where your dining table would go on that unit.
Are there windows there? It's really
Yes,
hard
that's
to
the, don't get dizzy. That's this bay here?
Yeah.
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 The plans show it like it's a dead space or something.
Study session, not quite done yet. Good pickup.
But the intention is that it's
That's right.
The intention
dining
is
area.
that's the bay in that unit, that's the
Okay.
dining area.
Okay.
And we'll, if that unit in particular and the justification of that bay, we'll get you that unit in the final packet.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have.
So there was an issue that was raised with regard to the width of the courtyard and the ratio between the width of the courtyard and the height of the wall. So have you begun to
Yes,
look
I
at
have
that?
a
And
study
so can you
that I
talk
can-
about
Yep.
what you plan to do about that?
Where's that packet? The courtyard study packet that we did this morning. So we reviewed the code sections of interior courts, which is the term used. And you can see that there's a dotted line here that sets the 50 feet. This courtyard is actually 51 feet and exceeds the requirement as it gets deeper and exceeds the requirement even at the face. This courtyard, you can see there are 4 bay windows that encroach upon the 50-foot width. And you can see that in this unit, there's approximately the corner of this living area that encroaches. If you wanted us to revise it, then we could push stuff back and push stuff over. If you wanted to interpret the code, it says a minimum of 14 feet. So the narrowest you will allow a courtyard is 14 feet from me to you, one unit to another, in a building that's shorter. As your building gets taller, the courtyard wants to get wider, and it wants to get wider for light and air reasons, not necessarily privacy reasons, or you would have held me to a tighter standard even when I'm shorter, right? So the goal of making a courtyard wider is for light and air and vision, not necessarily for privacy, because your code has already set a minimum standard. Now, you can argue that as a building gets taller and there's more people in it, privacy becomes a premium. So there's 2 spots here, from there to there and there to there, and this location here. Now, all the courtyards are open on one side, so they are much longer than they need. They're infinitely longer than they need to be, and the issue's right there, and those 4 bay windows. And so that's what we studied. So to meet your code exactly, those 4 things would need to go away, and this would need to push over. And if you saw that these weren't technically interior courtyards, because they're open on one side, they're not interior of the building like a donut, and you don't perceive an appreciable light and air and privacy issue, then maybe you can see your way clear that the design's okay as it is. But that's not, I'm just explaining the problem as best I can. That's your purview to make the recommendation that you think's appropriate.
Well, basically, you would lose 2-bedroom units, they'd become 1-bedroom units if you had to open it up.
The quick solution to this one is this 2-bedroom becomes a 1-bedroom, that unit slides over and that problem goes away. The quick one to this is the 4 bay windows go away and the unit gets reconfigured. So is that, I mean, that's part of what planning commissioners and design review commissioners and city council members do for a living, is interpret the code and the intent. And whether the fact that the courtyard actually exceeds it, and where it's its most problematic, it's deepest, it's wider, and as you get to the front where you actually have views out, does that meet the intent or no? But that's the study, and we just did that today, and we can get that, and those are all the technical height issues. We can get this packet over to you so you can study it. Did that address the concern? Not solve it,
Well,
but
it
address the
explains
question.
the-
It explains the problem.
Yeah, it explains what you're proposing to do. So these unit changes, is that taking place just at level 3 at the podium
would go all the way
level,
up.
or would go all the way up?
All-
So all of those units would be modified.
So we would lose a number of 2-bedroom units.
Well, Jeff probably won't let me do that, so I'll probably be asked to squish the bubble different and solve the problem. You could make my life easy by seeing around that, but this one's probably not that horrible. This one probably should be worked on. I mean, bay windows into the encroachment, there's exceptions for that in lots of codes. A 10-foot room jumping into it here probably is a tad aggressive.
Could you slide everything just out to the west on that side?
Fire lane issue.
Yeah, and the fire
That-
The bubble's a little more
clearance,
complicated
okay,
than that.
yeah.
But, you know, you all challenged me, in December, and we're here. So,
Chair Cardoza,
Yes.
I'd just like to clarify a little bit about the court issue. I'm not sure what this differentiation is about interior versus whatever. The code defines a court as an open space between facing exterior walls of residential buildings on the same lot. And by exterior, it means the skin of the building. So even if you had a donut-shaped building with a courtyard that's entirely surrounded, those walls that face it are still exterior walls. It doesn't mean walls that only face out like to the street. It means the exterior skin of the building. So these are all courts as defined by the code. And the dimensions, as I said, are supposed to be
50 feet.
a minimum of 50 feet. And for better or for worse, our code doesn't have any flexibility in this. There's no exceptions.
That's going to be my question.
There's no minor conditional use permit to vary from it. It would require a variance to waive this court requirement.
Now, some of these units have balconies and some do not. Is there,
on this particular floor plan, and I think the other ones are similar, you can see that, and I'll just sort of walk you around, there's one here, there's one here. Every single interior corner unit has one. This has one. This unit currently does not. This has one. This small studio does not. This is here, 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 there. So it's those little squares that are.
are these balconies required by code?
Well, they're required to have a certain amount of private open space per unit. That can be and it has to meet certain dimensional standards, but that can be substituted for common open space at a 2-to-1 ratio. So they're not required to have a patio or balcony for every single unit. In fact, they're not necessarily required to have them for any units, as long as they provide enough common open space to compensate for it.
That's a excellent point. The last time we were here, there was an extensive discussion about exterior balconies and their appropriateness, and one of the things that AvalonBay did after that meeting was go back and canvass a building that they have not far from here to study whether or not balconies were desirable or non-desirable in similar locations adjacent to the train tracks and near the freeway. And it turns out that they're desirable by that. There's a group of people that loves the trains, wants a balcony, and wants to watch the train and wants to hear the train. That group exists. And so we were charged with studying as many balconies as possible. So two things will have happened to this project. One, the amount of common open space or open space that's available to everyone, as you saw from the numbers, has dramatically increased. I mean, there's like 38,000 square feet of it now, and the requirement's for 8, and I would say all but 2 stacks, you said, or 3 stacks of units don't have private balconies currently. So the amount of private and common open space that exists in this project will be unlike anything else in your city that I know of.
Well, I live in a balcony that faces due west. I live in a unit that has and it's so windy it's virtually unusable. And most of the apartments and condominiums in Emeryville do have balconies, and if you drive around, you never see anyone using them. And at Watergate, where I live, a number of people have enclosed them, which makes them usable
with
spaces.
plexi?
Yeah. But, you know, you're in the business, so you know.
Well, the current marketing study that we completed after our last meeting would indicate that people, whether they use them or whether they know it's windy, they want them.
On page A41 and A4, or A.1 and .2, there's some close-ups of floor plans of the units, and I'm kind of guessing that the windows just didn't get put in, or is this really true that some of them don't have any windows?
When you do, though you're looking at the enlarged unit plans?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's,
Please tell me there's windows.
yeah, in order to understand where the individual units are within the individual units, you need to look at the overall unit plan. Because
Okay.
the skin of these projects is located in the overall plan, not the individual unit plan. And then the rush to get the information out, we didn't bind what's called the XREF to the unit plan, so they're not there. So the unit plans are more about the interior space, not the windows, and the overall floor plans are more about where each individual unit is window is for each individual unit. And we can have that cleaned up before we get back in front of you, so it's crystal clear.
Everybody's got windows, so yes?
Everybody's required by law to have windows. They're required to have a certain size of window, and they're required to meet a certain acoustic code.
I notice you have windows that come almost to the floor, which I think is a good thing.
We have different types of windows in different locations. When the acoustic report is developed and every window's detailed, certain windows, you can have a maximum amount of window, and so sometimes you have spandrel panel and sometimes you have clear glass. So depending on which unit is facing which direction, which is actually kind of a cool thing because the building starts to take on a character on each side. But yes, in general, we're trying to the windows are larger than they're required to be by code because you're chasing that industrial character.
And the wind wall for the courtyards it was interesting. How high is that more? What are you thinking?
Probably 8 to 10 feet tall.
Yeah, okay.
So are you far enough along to have a sense of the infiltration planters in the courtyard, how high they have to be? Because I often am seeing these ones that just really encroach on the space and you have a perception that you're just being hemmed in even more. And some of the graphics there looked like they were maybe 4 feet.
You mean the photographs?
Mm-hmm.
The one of
Where would
Ocean
I-
Avenue.
How could I reduce yours, Maru?
Well, there's a requirement of how high they really have to be useful in terms of stormwater.
Where?
It's usually 42 inches,
Here?
and then the soil's 6 inches or 8 inches below that, so that when they
Hang
fill
on,
up with
hang
water,
on.
they don't overflow.
Go ahead, scale it to whatever you want.
I think our civil engineers are going to help us try to cut those down as much as possible. The other thing that happens is that when the infiltration, which usually happens adjacent to the building, is adjacent to a window, we get into heights of windows, the bottom of the window. So we want to keep those things as low as possible. And if we can move most of the water actually down to the ground, we'd be better off. Yeah, and we do have a lot of permeable area now around the site. So I think we might luck out by kind of decreasing the height of those planters.
Yeah, if those could be minimized, that'd be great.
Well, as you can see, I mean, as one of the commissioners picked up, the patios of the individual spaces spill out beyond the patios that are upstairs. And then the C3 landscape are used as buffers to isolate semi-private space from public space. So we're not trying, we're trying to maximize both the green belt buffer and the usable space for the two groups.
And only the darker blue of the types of planters are meant for infiltration. The other are regular planters so that we can have a mix of planters.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Oh, yeah. The darker blue planters indicate the stormwater management planters, whereas the green ones are regular plants, so we'll have a wider palette of plant choices for those and height for those walls. So it wouldn't be as relentless as having 42-inch planters for the entirety of the courtyard.
Good.
Do the southern balconies, which currently don't have a stair to the outside, will you be putting one on that will go down into that drive area?
There's no requirement to do that.
There isn't?
No.
Because you do have one on the north.
We do have one on the north end because we have the corridor that's here and the one that's here that allows this space to exit there and there. That corridor doesn't exist here, so we have a stair that comes around and deposits itself in the plaza there. So this one does it, and the reason we chose to do it here is because it creates an architectural element on that corner at the gateway moment. And on this side, we don't need them because we solved it a different way. and I don't really want to dump people into the middle of the fire, quote-unquote, fire drive lane.
And the northwest corner is private, so.
This is all 4 private balconies or patios.
So I take it we're doing questions now and then comments later?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have several questions. Along the Shellmound Street side, the sidewalk, do you guys have an idea of what we're looking at the minimum width of the sidewalk in that area?
Yeah.
Does it meet our code
I think it's a 12-foot sidewalk.
at the minimum?
Yes.
Okay, the tightest part.
Yes, it's right.
Okay, so that's a comment. That's a comment. So, I guess Brad pretty much got the description. I just didn't see on the plans how the fence ran along the north end. So the stairwell that's an architectural feature that comes down out of that corner is behind
The fence is here,
and
Comes around.
Okay.
turns into both a man gate and a fire gate. And that's, as you picked up in the photo, the shadow is an ornamental metal fence. The stair deposits lands here.
okay, how do you secure that
It's secured at the top.
at the top? Okay. Because I guess because you haven't gotten into the TDM yet, you don't know really how you're going to encourage transit use or anything. That's still got to be fleshed out. Okay.
I think that's so much bigger.
They're smarter than we are.
And I think everything else that I'm going to have beyond that is more of a comment.
I had another question. Could we pull up, oh, where is it? A 1.3 for a sec.
No, we need, you're in your packet, correct?
Yeah, is that,
No, that's fine.
It's the northwest
Oh, that elevation?
elevation.
Okay. Yeah, zero it out again. She just wants the rendering.
did you, I think you might have.
I think this
That's
is.
southwest. You want the northwest?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's actually, yeah, the southwest corner, but the 8.1.3
Yeah.
is, no.
I think that's
There
mislabeled.
There it is. One.
That one.
Can you describe in more detail that corner right
Here?
there? Yes.
What we're
And
doing?
what's going on? Because, you know, there's, that's also, this, as you being part of the gateway, that's a big part of the gateway.
Well, the building's turning back in.
So
Well,
what's
I just
going on
want
here?
to talk a little bit more about the materials and what's going on with that blank wall. And
So if you remember, one of the only materials I believe, well, except for a little bit of plaster, because I actually like smooth plaster in that curved form there. This is the college,
yeah,
and that's the corner of their building. And what we've done here is, there's units, flats that you can't see because the trees are grown, but there's flats that sit across the top of this. The bike spa and its entrance and its plaza sits here. So this is actually the loading dock. And because the loading dock isn't normally used and we didn't want to have an awful roll-up garage door, we've done what we call a fire station door. And we did this on the Wax Museum in San Francisco, where you take a roll-up metal door and you put translucent panels in it, and you create a translucent panel window here so that this thing has a feel to it of part of that industrial character without looking like a roll-up garage door loading dock.
so
So,
you're
and
saying it's
then
trans, so you'll be able to
sits-
look inside? 'Cause it's
When the door's
translucent?
up, you will. When the door's down, you won't be able to see in.
But it'll be glass, it'll be frosted or something?
Translucent, yes,
Yeah.
like frosted glass.
Yeah.
And if you recall, the base of the building is concrete, and we're exposing the concrete. We're doing old school board form concrete, so it has that rustic base to it. And then from there up, the grayish materials tends to be the metal siding. The two-tone material is the rain screen, and the brick is the brick.
And so where those two, there's like a person wearing black outfit and a white person, little
Here?
couple there, yeah.
Where are they going?
No. That is, woo,
I'll show you.
that's the troweled, smooth, is that what you're talking about? That,
You're looking at this corner, that's the wall, and where those people were going, they're actually walking through the moment next to the bike entrance. This is the roll-up glass garage door.
huh?
So I'll go back.
So that's a little
So there's a little,
board form also, or is that,
Yes.
you said smooth?
Everything from the second floor down is pretty much board form.
Board form.
So we're trying to create the concrete plinth that the old factory was built on, and where you can see that on moments, we break that rule where the residential shows up on these corners, we're doing the brick veneer. You can see that the nave touches the ground in spots. And then at this moment where the sidewalk spills in underneath the building and then the lobby lounge spills out, there's actually two ways into the main lobby. One's through the brick nave and one's off of this corner.
Okay, thank you.
What would be the ceiling heights of the uses along Shellmound? The dog spa, the bike spa, the.
I think your sections show the ground floor at 14 feet, if I'm not mistaken, because that ground floor, as Maru pointed out in her presentation, there's stackers back there, which requires a higher garage height, which then extrapolates itself into the retail space. You recall that when we were here, we talked about different ways to deal with this edge and whether retail or reserving retail was appropriate, or did you have uses, or did you have imagery, or something you could do to activate it. We've talked with, there's a heavy biking community. We've created a bike spa and a dog spa and a fitness area and tried to have those spill out. People could rent these spaces and put on clinics, either internally, they could do that. Externally, they would need to arrange it with the ownership, but we've had those conversations. Same thing for the dogs, how to groom your dog, wash down. And then, so we've tried to activate this absent a tenant. And, we've been talking about this project for quite a while, and Jeff's been working in the community trying to find a tenant, and at the moment, we don't have one, so we're sort of like, okay, how do we still make this great without a tenant? How do we make it look like it's a bike shop, a dog grooming place, a fitness thing, and bring these down to the street and activate this sidewalk edge? And I'm a little biased, but I think that the client and the landscape architect and our designers did a pretty good job of doing that.
It's 14 feet.
Yeah.
This is double height. So this is a two-story space, so that's almost 22, 23 feet.
And then my other question is about the landscaping. Can some of the renderings and photos that you showed of other things, it looked like some of what was shown was treating some of the stormwater runoff in the street. Would that be the case here, or no?
Like in this condition here, this actually isn't a stormwater.
Well, no, there was one where it looked like they were rain gardens or something like that.
Right, adjacent to the curb.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to do that here. It's difficult to get the water across the sidewalk and over into that, other than just treating the sidewalk water, from the building.
It'll all be treated on site.
Yeah, it's all going to be treated on the property.
All of this stormwater on the site?
This
This
picture?
one here.
That's the
Yeah.
image I'm thinking of. Yeah.
That's where it rains a lot.
This image is in here more to show the buffer between the
Right.
cars and the sidewalk, that concept.
Another question. Did you talk about or think about or have in the plan, I'm not sure because it's hard to tell, single locked bike storage anywhere?
Yes.
I know you have a lot
Short
of
answer
different.
is yes. Your bicycle group was very helpful to us. And I didn't get to solve all of their requests when I saw you the last time. But There were long conversations about the importance of a bicycle entry and a car entry and a variety of bicycle types of storage and opportunities. And so we have racks, we have lockers, we have secured rooms, we have the bike spa. So in this scenario, we see if you're a biker and you live here, and even if you're a biker and you don't live here and you know somebody that does, there's this gathering space outside the bike spa, and you can repair bikes in there. There's racks in there, so you could lock storage, so it looks like a bike shop. And then we have a secured room directly behind it off of this entrance that has racks and lockers. We have both. And then we have a couple of other rooms scattered around off of the linear park, simply because I think having them spread throughout the project rather than all in one location is more useful to the people that live there. And so we have some rooms and lockers here and some rooms and lockers here and some racks. And then we have public racks in front of the bike spa and in front of the lobby.
I just wanted to add, there's one other thing that I think we didn't talk about was these townhouse communities are really not part of the internal circulation of the building. You can come in and park, but there's exiting out from the garage in various places to get to these. So it'd be like walking from your garage to your front door of your place, or you could come in along.
So specifically where those two the little triangle.
There's actually a lobby here and a lobby here, for lack of a better way to put it, one here and one here.
Okay.
So if you parked your car in here and you lived over here, you'd walk around this way.
Yeah.
If you were a visitor, you'd be buzzed through the gate. And we actually studied internal corridors versus external access, and the client and the people that asked determined that it would, to have a true front door rather than two front doors. Because when you do internal access, you both have an external access and an internal access. There's no real front to your townhouse. And our analysis showed that someone that wants to live in a townhouse wants a townhouse and wants a front door and wants to enter from the front. And that parking your car here and just walking around like that is no big price to pay. And it improves the quality of the unit. And if you looked at sort of how Jeffrey and his team studied those, before I go into brain damage from scrolling through these too fast, you can see that, you know, the gate, and that's where you picked up the ornamental picket, and then the pathway, and then the little private screened patio, and then the front door to your unit. And then there's the garden areas out in front that are a combination of false turf and real planting. So it starts to blur the line between where the fire trucks drive and it's a park and it's a driveway and it's a landscape area. I thought it was, and that's fake grass. And so the quality of it, and this is and so the quality of what you can get at the ground plane is quite remarkable. That's the same material. That's the same material. And so this should take on the character of a little park like Linear Park all the way around the project.
Well, the alternative was to make a road around it, so, you know.
No, there wasn't. That was never an alternative.
You, in this elevation A1.3, you do show floor-to-ceiling windows. Now, is
Yes.
that something you hope to be able to do, or
No, the framing that you see there, like on these, that's the framing that you will see there. What's operable, what's clear glass, and what's translucent becomes a function of the construction document requirements of that opening. So if I have a super high STC rating on one thing, I may end up with a translucent style panel, not a clear glass one, because I need to meet the STC rating. On ones where I don't have that, then it'll be clear floor to ceiling glass. And so each one of these windows takes on a slightly different character. The building will fundamentally look like that.
It appears to be a 5-story wood frame. I don't know of another one in Emeryville. Is this something that's...
Type 3, 5-story is a new section of the code. You used to be able to do it under what was Type 3A modified, and when the code was revised the last time around, you're allowed to do 5 stories. The true nuance in the code is the number of podiums, and shortly before this meeting, we got a memo that the building official is currently comfortable, and I'll use that term loosely, with the 2 stories of concrete and the 5 stories of wood. He has a few comments, and we have a conference call scheduled tomorrow to go through that. So that was a miraculously wonderful piece of news to get right before the meeting. Is that a fair assessment of his memo?
I would, well, my understanding is he's more than comfortable with it. He's basically approved it.
Okay, well, I was a little dodgy on the courtyard, so I was being careful.
It's called an AMMR, alternate materials and methods request, and that's what gets approved. However, there's a little wrinkle, which is that the Alameda County Fire Department, which serves Emeryville, also has to approve it. That approval is forthcoming, we hope.
So on the off chance it all goes off the rails, the backup plan is that you build what's called a Type 1B structure, and you build it out of metal studs rather than wood frame, and that's a by right structure that you're allowed to do. The only problem is it increases construction costs, which then translates to increased rents, which then causes problems. And so hopefully the AMMR and the 3/2 will be okay. It has been in other jurisdictions, but that doesn't mean anything.
I have, oh, you actually haven't gone yet, have you?
No, I did, but I don't have any more questions.
Okay, I have some other questions, actually. I have 4. I'll try to keep them brief. So really quickly, these are rental only? Are there any ownership units proposed?
It's proposed as a for rent project.
Okay.
It is being mapped, correct, Jeff?
Yeah. And then in terms of the changes to the project, to the unit mix, so from the prior design to the current design, did you take away certain units? Did you add more 2-bedroom units, for instance? Did you decrease the number of 3-bedroom units? Can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I left off my statistics. Shame on me. We actually did all
I was looking for them on the project summary, but that's...
The unit count previously was 266, and it's currently 211. The percentage of 2 bedrooms went up. However, the actual number remained within 1. So it was 99 before, and it's 98 now. The number of 1-bedrooms fell from 138 to 96, so that fell rather dramatically. Studios also fell. They went from 17 to 11, and 3-bedrooms fell from 12 to 6.
Okay.
Townhouses are a new product type that didn't exist previously, and the average unit size remained about the same, about 1,000 square feet.
Okay. And then the community garden, do you know the distance from that to the freeway, roughly?
To the freeway off-ramp, I would estimate it at...
To the freeway, not the off-ramp,
Oh,
but
to the freeway proper?
Yeah.
It's got to be 85 feet.
It's got, no, to the freeway proper, it's got to be 600-700 feet.
Okay.
And there's also a hill in between there too from the...
Okay.
If you look at photographs of the site, you can see it kind of sits down in the area, so it's not like you're right on the freeway.
Okay, and then the last question I had, aside from the letter that's attached from Norai Mjost, what other methods or processes did you use to determine that you couldn't find a tenant for that space, or have retail be a possible use?
Do you want to address that, Jeff? Yeah, I can. Because
yeah, we didn't do any exhaustive analysis. It's really more of a sense of where retail wants to be based on our experience in other cities and what's happening right now in Emeryville. And there are really we have an in-house retail group that handles our leasing throughout the country. And as we talk to them, as well as brokers who are active in the market, we really couldn't come up with a use type that would be interested in this location. I mean, we can be interested, but the actual operator has to be interested. Their preference is in other areas. And public market certainly is one of the obvious ones where that project's gaining some momentum, and that's where the action's going to be.
That's all I had.
Brad, do you have any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much for your time and attention. I appreciate it.
We'll now open the meeting to the public. Is there any members of the public who'd like to speak on this issue? Please sign in afterwards. You're limited to 3 minutes.
All right. Hi, I'm Bobby Lee. I'm a resident over at Bay Street. I wanted to come before you and talk a little bit about some traffic concerns I have with this. I know I just realized sitting here today that the traffic study is not done yet for this property. But as you probably know, Shellmound is a very busy street, and especially that particular area. There's the intersection of 66th, 67th, and then the on-ramps and the off-ramps. With potentially 350 new cars coming in and out on a daily basis, so twice a day, I could see a lot of kind of confusion and problems, especially for cars coming northbound on Shellmound, making a left into that driveway into the entrance of the apartment building. And I'm wondering if the commission could take into consideration requiring a left turn pocket to get in that driveway. And kind of that, there's also a larger issue that not necessarily with this project, but also with kind of the public market project as well, where you've got 8 parcels now, 7 on the public market, and this one parcel that's being redeveloped. And it seems like there are traffic studies being done individually, but I don't know if there's if the commission or another committee is looking at kind of the overall picture, the traffic picture on Shellmound, because it's pretty bad when it comes to the evenings and on the weekends as well. So I did want to ask you guys about that, and also to request that some sort of pocket or something be done for that left turn into the driveway. Separately, I'm just kind of curious if there are any, there's going to be spaces for electric vehicles, car shares as well, but it sounds like that's also something that would be kind of later in the timeline. So, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Please sign in. Any other members of the public?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Matt Weber. And this is the first time I've seen the project, but taking a look at where it's come from in regards to the design that I saw presented tonight with the donut shape, and the design that they're presenting now with the interior courtyards, and being a nearby resident, it seems like that's a vast improvement. Seems also like the type of materials that they're proposing seem to be of high quality, and an improvement over some of the older building stock, especially in the nearby area. So I think it's a great improvement for the area. I do have a few questions, also not necessarily related to this project, but as it relates to transportation, and that is, it's a really awkward place in Emeryville as it relates to how you make your entrance onto the freeway. I know there's been a lot of discussion in regards to whose jurisdiction that might be. Maybe it's Berkeley, maybe it's Emeryville, maybe it's Caltrans. But as you're passing through that area, I don't know whether it's ever been resolved, but as you're passing through that area, ton of potholes, ton of area that just very easily could just be repaved, whether it's part of this project or part of perhaps the capital improvement program that the city is considering. That seems like, given the number of people that go through there regularly, that would be a huge improvement. And also for the future residents here. And then lastly, I just wanted to note that feels a little uncomfortable from a bike perspective coming through here. I'm not sure whether there's intended to be bike lanes in the future, whether there are bike lanes, and perhaps I just have been missing them. But if there would be some consideration given to that, that'd be great. But overall, I'd kind of like to vote support. I know you guys aren't voting, but it seems like it's a great project, and I'd be happy to. I'm happy to live nearby, and I'd be happy to be a resident.
Charlie, could you kind of clarify for us, because I know where he's talking about. To my understanding, in Emeryville, the pavement is good. We have bike lanes on Shellmound Street. Is there a true delineation where Emeryville ends and either the state property begins or Berkeley begins going towards Aquatic Park? Because that's where it gets really bad.
Yeah, it's called the city limit.
Right, and okay, so on the other side, the north side of Emeryville city limits, who owns that street?
Well, he's correct that the jurisdictional issue there is sort of unclear.
So it's just left abandoned?
At least it's unclear to us. No, I mean, I'm sure whoever owns the street knows that they own it. The reason it's unclear, you can tell when you're in Emeryville because that's where the road gets better.
Exactly.
It's just immediately south of the off-ramp, of the Shellmound Street
67th
off-ramp.
Street.
Right, and if you were to turn, if you're sitting at that stop sign at that off-ramp, you're in Berkeley. If you turn right and then proceed, then you're immediately in Emeryville. If you turn left, you're going into Berkeley. Because that roadway goes over Ashby Avenue, and Ashby Avenue is a state highway, plus it then leads to an on-ramp to the freeway, it's unclear whether that's Caltrans right-of-way or whether it's City of Berkeley right-of-way, but whoever it is, they're certainly not taking care of it.
I was just through there today. It's awful.
I know.
And having just gotten over a bike accident, it's very scary.
Well, every time I have an opportunity to meet with Berkeley people, I put in a plug for repaving that street, and they say, oh, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, okay. As long as we're on it, we're trying.
Yeah, I've heard the same from Berkeley, that they
It's not
feel that
theirs.
it's not their
Of course not.
responsibility. So I don't know if there's a 3-person meeting with Caltrans
Yeah.
in a year or 5 years or whatever.
The only traffic on that street is going onto the freeway.
Or through into the park.
Or to the
Well,
park.
there's just a little dead-end
Yeah.
cul-de-sac there.
It gets used.
No more public comment? We'll close the public meeting and start our discussion. Brad, why don't you start this time?
Yeah, I think the project's a big improvement over what we saw last time. I'm liking the materials, the general layout. I like the townhouses at grade with true opening or true, entries from the exterior. Let's see here. Yeah, regarding the findings that the commercial unit isn't really feasible at that location, I mean, I think it'd probably be good to get more information regarding that, but intuitively, I guess I feel like not many commercial uses would really be that feasible there. Regarding the design, it seemed like at the main entry, you're looking to try to make that iconic, but I feel like it needs to be taken to just a slightly higher level. That steel frame that you run up over the roof, over the parapet level at a couple locations seems slightly artificial. And then like to see if there's a way to maybe pop up that top penthouse unit to a 1.5 height unit. And one of the features that I do like that I saw elsewhere in the design was the 3 chimneys next to each other in sort of a brace frame cage. Something like that might be a little bit more kind of really create that iconic entry feel that it seems like you're going for. Let's see. And then at a couple places you have these plaster panels tacked on to the balcony rails. Some of them are orange, some of them are white, and I would just as soon lose those. I don't really think you gain anything with them. Yeah, they're green there or something, but here they're orange. So, but yeah, let's see. As far as the fencing goes, I mean, I think it'd be nice to find something other than chain link when you get past the ornamental metal, because the fact of the matter is, trying to grow vines on it, some might be successful, some might not, and I think we're all trying to avoid chain link in general. It looks like from your elevations and your renderings that you're recessing the windows into the framing, so you've got a couple-inch reveal of the building material, the exterior cladding turning in, and just like to make sure that happens and that the windows aren't feeling too superficial. I like the courtyards a lot. I do feel like especially the one where you've got the whole unit kind of infringing into it. I'd like to see that pulled back. I really like the stair from the courtyard on the north side coming down to grade, and I think it would be great to see the same kind of thing happening on the south side, and it could just be a matter of connecting the two courtyards with a balcony between them along the south side and one shared stair. But I think that there's just something nice about knowing that those courtyards can actually connect down to the sort of park that you're creating out of the EVA. Let's see. Yeah, as far as the landscaping and the courtyards go, I like the landscaping a lot. I would like to see some kind of, right now it looks like if you're in your unit and you go out to your patio and you wanted to get from your patio to the courtyard itself, you would have to go back into your unit, go into the hallway, walk around the hallway, and come out into the courtyard. And so I think creating some little sliver, little cut through those planters to be able to access directly from your patio to the courtyard without compromising too much feeling of the privacy at the same time would be nice. Let's see. With regard to the primary plan, I think I'd mentioned this before, but with that, you kind of have one main spine running east-west as far as your double-loaded corridors, and then you've got another one running north-south with a central circle. A couple things come to mind. I'd love to see, I mean, one thought was I'd really like to see the central circle become more of an atrium with a round balcony around the perimeter of it so that you get a connection between floors, and you could have a skylight up at the top, some way to bring more light into that central area. I'd also love to see the corridors daylight at the ends. I think one of them does, but if there's a way, I know it's about the unit mix, but if there's a way to get that corridor to daylight, especially out on the east side, I think that would be really nice. I'd like to see it, I mean, ideally I'd like to see more connection between the upper floor corridors and the balcony, or and the courtyards, whether it's just a window so that when you're walking down so you don't have to go into your unit to necessarily see the courtyard and connect you to the courtyard, but if you're walking down the corridors, you could actually see the courtyards and see what's going on there. I think that would really help activate the courtyards more. Not sure how I feel about the artificial turf being used. I know it's an issue about irrigation, etc., but I always get confused whether which one's grasscrete and which one's grass paved. But the one that has the interlocking pavers, that you actually see the pavers, but then you have the landscape kind of coming through that. I mean, it feels nice, and it doesn't feel so much like a paved area, and it feels more authentic, I think, than the artificial turf in the other one, whichever one it is. I would like to see a pedestrian crossing across Shellmound. I don't think that there's really, I mean, I tried getting across there when I was looking at the site, and it's with cars coming around right off the freeway and the train tracks. It's like an obstacle course. Yeah, I think those are my main points.
Okay, I'll start with the mix of uses. So whether the finding can be made that the mix of uses is infeasible on the site with regard to having some sort of commercial use, I definitely feel that we need more information to be able to determine that the next time you come before the commission. With regard to the parking and the reduction that will be requested at a later date, I think that the project does a great job of providing bike parking, and with the bike spa, it really does encourage bicycling, and I think that the way the design of the sidewalks definitely would promote people walking, but the challenge is how to get them across that road, how to get them across Shellmound safely. And so I think some additional considerations definitely going to need to happen in the next go-around, whether it's, providing some sort of, contributing to a crosswalk or a better bus stop or shuttle stop location to encourage people to do more walking, and also to encourage that connection to Aquatic Park and also towards the east. I think that because this is, a new residential project at that location, although it's adjacent to an industrial area, you really are starting the trend. You're basically going to be the first to really say, hey, there's residential here now. We are going to start making that connection heading east. And so I think the project needs to make that move and make that statement in terms of helping to make a connection to the industrial side so that people can walk to amenities on the east. With regard to the unit mix, I am kind of concerned with the reduction of the number of 3-bedroom units. That just jumped out at me. I didn't do the math in terms of how, whether that's in proportion to the total reduction, but I was just struck by, we went from 6 3-bedroom units down to 3-bedroom units. And so it's important as far as priorities to have larger units to promote, families or larger groups of people living there. And we had that discussion last time about whether it's appropriate to have families living there or not. But regardless, that's what I think about that issue. Otherwise, I think that the reduction of the studios and having more 2-bedrooms is definitely a positive. I'm really thrilled with the townhouses. I think that's a very good improvement to the project. As far as the open space, obviously the project is now going above and beyond requirements for the open space. You just need to work out the situation with the courtyard. And my comment to that would be to not reduce the number of 2-bedroom units to make that happen. With regard to the design, I think that the design has really come a long way, and I really appreciate the amount of attention that you've given the project in terms of looking at the historical context of Emeryville and the inspirational imagery. I really appreciate that, and I feel that new projects that are built in Emeryville should harken back to the history of Emeryville. Some people want to get away from that history, but I think the history is there whether you want to get away from it or not, and I think that it's important to embrace that. That said, I am aware of other Avalon-type projects in San Francisco. I believe the company that I work for has done some of those projects for you, and so when I look at this particular shot here, it kind of reminds me of, I think, the project that's on King Street in San Francisco. So when I look back to the inspirational imagery and then I look to this, I just want to make sure that it screams Shellmound Street and not King Street. So just keep that in mind as you're developing the materials further. Otherwise, I really like the fact that you're using brick and steel, but I think these yellow or green pops of color kind of brought me back to what I see more in San Francisco. And we definitely want this project to be an Emeryville project. Let's see, do I have any other comments? I think that's all I have. Yeah.
Okay. I also think that this has come a long way, both in terms of the design and the configuration of the open spaces, the shrinking, the expanding of the open space around the perimeter, which had to be done, and I'm glad it was. I like the use of the materials. In terms of the mix of uses, I think that your idea of the bike spa and the fitness and the dog spa are really interesting and are things, I think that those are some of the few uses that could relate to the aquatic park and to the bike traffic that goes by there. There are dog walkers all the time, there's bike people all the time, and as we're getting more and more apartments and condominiums in the area, there's going to be more people that would take advantage of bike spas and dog washing stations and that kind of stuff, and those could be uses that actually would activate that area. So I think that that's really interesting ideas, and I would like to see that followed up on so that we would have a mix of uses that was public as well as residential. In terms of the parking, I think we're going to get a lot more information from the traffic study in terms of what is feasible and what is reasonable, and of the types of TDM measures that you might take. I do think that it is also important to, do whatever can be possible to enhance that connection back east, as other commissioners have said, so that people will have a place to walk to other than the marketplace or aquatic park. So connecting, knitting our city back together has always been a challenge between the freeway and the railroad tracks and San Pablo Avenue and all that. So those connections are really important. I like the way that the Shellmound frontage is treated. That's the connections at the ground level to the building and the openings to the building. I think that the idea, the loading dock idea, is really a nice one. That it's functional. But it's not going to be an eyesore. It can be an attractive thing, even if there's some light coming through it at night. It can be a nice little sort of landmark amenity on that corner of the building. The unit mix, I also am glad to see the 2 units kept up, but the loss of the 3 units, that's an ongoing discussion in Emeryville about having more family accommodating units and more family accommodating, just more opportunities for families to stay in Emeryville, because right now everybody has to leave when their kids get a little bit older because there's not enough space for them. The open space, I think that it's a tremendous improvement. Again, I'm concerned about the impingement of infiltration planters that cramp the space that you've got. The space on the north is going to be sun challenged, definitely, so whatever can be done to sort of take advantage of its main amenity, which is the view out towards Aquatic Park, is really good. Having all of that pervious surface around the base of the building will be really helpful in terms of minimizing those stormwater planters and making the spaces in the courtyards a little bit more varied and flexible and not having concrete walls sticking up there. I am also just a little bit concerned about vegetable gardens that close to the freeway. I mean, I live far from the freeway, and the amount of particulate junk that ends up on my, windowsills and stuff is pretty alarming. So I don't know that food gardening in that corner is the best thing, but some other kind of community gardening use might be a nice thing there. That's what I've got for now.
Well, I agree with everyone else that it's a great improvement over what we saw before. And I think the idea of these alternative uses to commercial is a great thing. We have so many vacant ground floor commercial spaces in Emeryville now because it seems to be a mantra that if we have commercial on the ground floor, we'll bring to life, but if we can't find anybody to rent it, then it's meaningless. Also, I would support the reduced parking. I think people are becoming much more conscious of not driving as much now. This project is within 2 blocks of a Shellmound Powell Emery-go-round bus stop, and that runs 7 days a week. And I would like to see if the townhouses could be somehow enlarged to be 3-bedroom units, as that would be most suitable for families to live in, any units in the building. And I hope something of that sort could be worked out.
I don't have a whole lot of comments. I would just say bravo. I think you've done a really great job addressing pretty much all of our comments from the last study session. have some notes here. I just wanted to echo Commissioner Gunkel's comment about the chain link fencing. I think, yeah, anything we can do to eliminate chain link would be great, because I agree that, you know, there will be some spots where the vines don't take, or, you know, things like that. What else? I also like the comments about getting daylight into the corridors. I think if there's opportunities to do that through either skylights or the ends of the corridor, I know you have to have exiting requirements, but if there's a way to do it through the ends of the corridors or skylights or whatever, I think that's great. As far as TDM measures, normally I would say I'm really in favor of transit passes and AC Transit's Easy Pass program. I think in this location that's a little bit tougher. I think you are pretty close to Emeryville, which is a great resource. I'm not really sure where the nearest AC Transit line is. It doesn't seem like a heavy.
Go to San Francisco, right across from Starbucks.
So down the street?
65th, yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe it makes sense. I mean, I think if it makes sense in this location, that's something I would love to see. I think that's always, I feel like that's something that's really a win-win for everybody. It's a low-cost program to enter. It's a benefit to the residents. And it can be a real asset that can, work towards increasing rents, or, giving a reason to have higher rents. So I think it seems like a real win-win, if it's possible. If not, or in addition to that, I think this would be a good location for a car share pod. It seems like with the proximity to Expression that there might be some use of a car share pod by the students, or some of the surrounding businesses even. So I think that would be a plus for a TDM measure. Let's see. As far as the courtyards are concerned, I am a little disappointed that we don't have flexibility in the planning regulations to waive any of those requirements. So, in lieu of that, I mean, looking at them, I sort of like the scale of them. I wouldn't want them to be any smaller, but I do. The renderings, they look like they are a nice scale. So, to the extent that we can, I would, support any. Personally, I would make an interpretation to give some flexibility there. And then, I guess, I just have one, two things. I actually do like those little yellow or orange or whatever they are panels on the balconies. I think, just in a couple of spots, I think they do provide a little interest. I sort of like that little flash of color. And then the only other thing my only other comment, aesthetically, just something that I think would really make the building pop, is looking through the images, your images that you looked at for inspiration. One thing I noticed as far as signage is there's some really great, like, industrial signage in here. The C&H sign, I've always loved that C&H sign. And there's that Pabst sign, which both of them have a lot of metal work behind them. Like the support structures, they seem almost oversized. They seem almost, sort of over-designed. And I think that's a really cool element. And I think if you could incorporate that into the signage, I think you do have some project signage with the address that's fairly large. I think if you could incorporate that kind of thing into the signage, it would really make the building pop, and that would be my only aesthetic comment. So I think that concludes my comments.
Well, I'm in general agreement with everything that's been said so far. With the caveat that I am disagree with crosswalks going through the industrial area in some ways, because it's basically eroding the industrial area, which is why I didn't like this project in the first place. But and I think it does need to be respected and kept. industrial. So that is a problem. That being said, I do also think that we're going to need some crosswalks because of the amazing amount of traffic that gets onto the freeway and off the freeway along Shellmound there. So, in terms of TDM, I like what everyone had brought up, and it's also electrical vehicle charging station seems like a good plan, and possibility for expansion depending on if that takes off even further, and the possibility of a left turn pocket as well may need to be, but that'll all come out in the traffic study, I'm sure. I very much like the use of the Shellmound frontage being for the dog spa, and I think that's wonderful, and for me, that solves that problem in terms of mix of uses. I like the materials, but I don't like the yellow squares, and I don't like the kind of stuck-up whatever metal job that sort of looks like the Home Depot thing down the street. It needs to have a better integration or something. It needs to make sense. I think Commissioner Gunkel mentioned that the one that was referred to in the initial photographs was containing some stacks or something. I'm not saying that would be what I'd like to see here, but that's kind of tacked on, so it's a little weird. Condo map happening is good. The pedestrian experience on the southeast corner still needs just a little bit more detail. It's a bit blank, but I think it's great, and I love board form. Maybe a sign goes there on the curved wall, something. But it just really needs to, the pedestrian experience on that corner as you walk up will be a little bit blank at this point. Chain link, no. I also agree with the natural light, possibly in that circular atrium, will really help to mitigate the long, narrow halls, which I don't think there is any possibility of having any windows out, from what I can tell on the plan. And I must say that the veg beds over there in the corner, not only will be getting a lot of debris, but they're kind of tucked a little close to the wall and the on the south side, and they're going to be really shady. So if you do include them, which might be okay, and I think the citrus trees are nice, they might have to push out and reconfigure a little bit to have more sun. So, I guess you could wash your vegetables. That's what I have to say.
Okay, gentlemen, now the good, bad, and the ugly. I do want to disclose that AvalonBay, the architect and developer, did meet at my house on the 13th of March, and we went over the preliminary details. I was glad to get the actual drawings in the packet. And so, first of all, I do want to say it is vastly improved. It's a much better project. I agree with 90% of the commission that the yellow boxes and the balconies need to go. I love the glass door around the bay, the loading dock in the bay. I really think that's really key, and it really does what we talked about hiding the garbage and et cetera. So I think that's very, very important. Like Commissioner Gunkel, I like the stacks, like where you said maybe the garbage area or the ventilation, if you could duplicate those someplace else, or the one stack that has the cover over it. I really like that element. The fin, I see what you're trying to do with that. It does kind of look stuck on, so if you're going to use it, make it relate to something. But I think overall, those items in the project are very good. The chain link fence, I agree with. We don't want to really look at chain link, even if it's black. But there is that box wired, those fences that are kind of boxed, and maybe you could do something like that. And those panels that plants will grow on probably a little better or something. But I agree that we do like the industrial look, but not the chain link look so much. So I definitely would want to stay away from that. In the staff report, I had some questions. On the car parking, you originally had 53 guest parking, but and you're lowering your spaces by 52, how many guest parking is that going to net out to? Do you guys know yet?
You mean required or provided?
Provided. They said there were going to be 53, but now they've lowered it down to 264 spaces, but it doesn't mention how many guest parking.
It includes 50.
It's going to remain 53?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't read it that way.
So 216 includes 53.
53,
guest parking.
okay. That's good. And we're going to get into detail for the mixed use in a minute. I think maybe because we can't get around the courtyard thing, it sounds like, I mean, I'm with Sean that maybe we, I don't mind the penetration in there, but it seems like something we can't get around. So maybe that end unit, that's the really big one, maybe you work that into another 3-bedroom. It's kind of unfortunate that we've lost half of the 3-bedroom units in there. So if we could maybe pick up a 3-bedroom in that corner and then meet the guidelines, I think that would be a good thing. TDM, I think we can do that. There is Transbay buses that meet at Shellmound and 65th Street. There are also, there's the 26 that goes around the public market. So I think TDM is a good thing to use in that. I was at a event last weekend where Donald Shoup spoke about parking, and preceding that, Mayor Bates welcomed everybody, and he mentioned something about bike share, talking to Emeryville, Berkeley, and Oakland, and it kind of took all of us in Emeryville there a little bit by surprise that they were talking. But I think that's something we need to plan for the future, that another one of the TDM measures could be providing a space for bike share. So I'd like to see you guys try to work on that a little bit. So then it gets into the bigger issue for me. So first of all, I do want to thank and commend the architects, the design team, and the developer on a job well done for improving this project from what it was. You listened to the suggestions during our first study session, and you took them to heart, and you really came back with a much improved design. Personally, I love the design, harkening back to our architectural, our industrial roots. I love the size of the new windows and the cladding. You guys have done a much, much better job with that. I like the tree type building rather than the donut style. The community garden I like, however that fleshes out with flowers or vegetables, whatever. I do think you need to make sure it gets enough sun. And even though this is just conceptual, I like the seating platforms along the Shellmound. I think that's a really good look, and I really like the idea, especially if you're going to have bikes there and you want people to congregate. I'm happy with the plant palette, so long as it does follow the bay-friendly protocols. And I really love the townhouses and the mix of private space and common space. But that being said, I still think that this site is much better suited for a taller building. And I think the examples that I had given fully illustrate that. And that type of building fully provides for a mixed-use opportunity for residential as well as hotel or commercial. And we're going to get into the fact that commercial does not necessarily mean retail. I just did a ride around 4th Street, across the street from your current project at 4th and U, and there are 8 commercial spaces in that, and I think there are 4 still left to be rented. The building across the street pretty much just finished renting out. It takes a while, we all know that, but if we don't provide commercial space, we're never going to get it. So with that, I have some ideas that we will be getting, and I'll get into, but my spouse was involved very heavily in the general plan process, and I know how hard we worked at getting that particular site zoned for a taller building and mixed use in particular, and they did see the viability of mixed use in that space. So with that in mind, I very carefully read the letter in support for not providing retail as a component of mixed use, and I agree that retail would have a hard time being supported in that project. But unlike the letter, I don't agree or believe that retail is the only type of mixed use we could put in the project. In fact, according to our planning regulations, there are many, many different types of commercial uses. And I'm really glad that a couple of our commissioners did mention and agree along with you that I believe that the dog spa and the bike spa should be open and available to the public. There are ways you can get key card access or something like that, but I think as a person who lives in a condo who has no place to fix my bike, that would be valuable for me, and I think it's a way to interface with the community. But along with that, that's just one idea to create mixed use, and I think there's the opportunity to mix the use by adding at least one more space for something other than residential. I believe that space could be created by changing the current fitness location into a commercial space equaling 15,000 square feet. One suggestion would be to move the fitness center, to close up the open area above the leasing office, and you could move the fitness center to that, or you can move the fitness center somewhere on the upper floors west of the building where it would face and overlook the bay view. But because the general plan designates this area as mixed use, I believe we need to require that this is a mixed use site. And the planning regulations can provide you, the developer, with a much broader idea of mixed use for this project. And I really don't want to bore everyone by reading all of these. So just to encapsulate that they say general use is including of offices, retail, services, public and educational, cultural, and medical institutions. So for that area, you could do something for arts and entertainment. They suggest a gallery. I would suggest maybe the home for the Emeryville Center for the Arts, maybe adding our historical society in that space along with them. That would encapsulate the libraries and museum component of our general plan suggestions. There's business services and offices for executive management, administrative, design professionals. I was thinking along the lines of an insurance company, a realtor's office, an attorney, a standard or landscape architect, a tax preparer, CPA, or a bookkeeper. You could do something with college and trade schools or institutional or instructional services. I was thinking maybe Expressions College could open a community outreach office there, maybe a small gallery showing what they could do, or what they do in the public. There's community assembly, and the general plan or regulations actually say that a small community assembly would be a facility of 1,500 square feet, which is exactly what that would be. You could also put in something like a daycare center, healthcare clinic, or medical office. I was thinking along the lines of a chiropractor, dentist office, or holistic type of practice. There's personal services, so excluding the ones that we probably wouldn't like a massage studio. You have beauty salons, service laundries, dry cleaners, barbershops. To me, we don't have a barbershop or a beauty shop in this town that I can think of, and especially at that end of town. So, I mean, a standard barbershop would be something you could put in there, a Pilates studio, yoga studio, and then something along the lines of a repair shop, maybe a shoe repair, appliance repair, computer is something I kind of think along the lines. So as you can see, there's a plethora of commercial uses that we could use that are not retail. And I think many of these uses are the type of businesses that people seek out, so you're not dependent on foot traffic, and you don't really need a lot of parking for something like a barber or something like that. So I think it is feasible that we can do some sort of mixed use if we open up the spas to the public and put in one space that we can call a commercial space. I think that would kind of meet the component of making this mixed use, and I think it's a project that, even though it's not a high rise, it's something I could support. I think that's all I have.
Wow. Thank you. I guess that's all we have on this subject. And I would suggest we take a 5-minute break.